Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Desert Dipshit Jared Hornbeck. But do not worry, because as usual, I am not strolling around this barren wasteland alone. Is there anyone here to pilot this giant robot with me?
Absolutely. It's Steve Guntley coming here from Austin, Texas, but I'm really more of a synthoid prosty if you really think about it. This is the podcast. It's all about post-apocalyptic TV stations, robots, scorpions, and a little something I like to call the Jiminy Factor. That's because this is the podcast about Crash and Burn and Robot Wars, two mech battler dramas directed by two different bands that were both misleadingly advertised as sequels to Stuart Gordon's Robot Jox. We're going to be talking about a lot of robots this time around. You could say we're probably going to cover the whole 9 robot yards. I mean, I think that's really fair to say. We're going to cover that whole 9 robot yards, a common expression that is very much in use all the time.
Very common.
I will say going into this, I was a little worried having like 2 mech movies in the same episode that I was going to have a little trouble telling these apart. And those worries were unfounded. Turns out these are dramatically different movies. Some would say to a maybe legally actionable way, but I don't know. We'll see how people feel about misleading advertising. But we have a very qualified guest to talk about these 2 movies today. Jared, who's here with us today?
Well, you uttered the words Robot Jox. And once you did that, what you essentially did was you summoned the spirit of John Torrani. Now, we knew we were going to get back here eventually. We knew that the people were asking for it. The people were clamoring for it. They said we need more John Torrani, and there's more robot content to cover. So he's back as our very first repeat guest on the show, John Torrani. What's going on, dude?
Hey, thank you guys for having me back. I'm really glad that I can close the robot loop, the Charles Band robot loop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just saw Charles in Pittsburgh at the beginning of March. I don't know when this is going to air, but I was at the Horror Realm show in Pittsburgh, which is a fun show. I'm going to go out to it again next year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I was hoping... I'm just gonna, it's funny. One of my film professors said the audience doesn't know about what you didn't get. So, like, if you're like making a film or something, and you you have something really spectacular planned and it doesn't work out, it's no big deal because the audience doesn't know that you didn't get that. Well, I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of go against what he taught me. I'm just gonna tell you, so the audience now knows I did not get Barbara Crampton to tell me about her experiences on Robot Wars because she did not go to the show because she could not fly out of LA. For some reason, there was some kind of problem with flights coming out of LA, and she was not able to attend the show. So it was funny because I ran into Charles Band before the show started, and he remembered me from Dallas, me moderating his panel, the Empire panel in Dallas at the Texas Frightmare weekend. And I said, how did you get out of LA? And he said, I didn't come from LA. I was shooting a new movie in Ohio, which is just down the road, 2 hours away. So I did not find out what that movie was, but there is something new from Full Moon coming out that was shot in Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah, which is cool.
You
didn't tell me not to tell people that.
One.
I guess I do.
Yeah, he's got some stuff going on because I've been following on the Patreon all the pulp noir stuff and new stuff that they have going on. It seems to be pretty busy. There's a shocking amount of Patreon notifications that I'm getting for stuff that he's posting. He's like really into keeping people in the loop on this, on like what they're doing now.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on, which is exciting because I will say one of the things about doing the show so far that's been the most rewarding thing to me is to, I was familiar with the company, familiar with a bunch of the movies, not even a fraction of all of the ones that exist. But it was like, all right, I'll get to watch some bona fide classics. I'll get to watch some stuff that I saw and need to revisit, and I'll get to see a ton of shit I've never seen before. And what I've grown to really feel over the last, the amount of time we've been doing this show is just sort of a reverence for the company, where it's like, now I'm super interested. I want to see all this new stuff that's coming out now. I want to see where this new phase of Full Moon is going to land in terms of the differences between Paramount, Kushner Lock, Tempe, all modern day, all that stuff. So I'm excited that Charles Band's still at it. I'm excited that they're still churning these things out, because I'm just so, even the stuff that I don't enjoy as much, there's just so much content out there that they've put out that it's like I can find something to gravitate towards, and so I'm just excited that it's still going on.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the reason why I didn't get to go up to Charles and talk to him about whatever he's doing, is because he had like the longest line at the show, which I was surprised by. Not trying to take anything away. That's not me knocking him or anything, but his line was never short. And he sold a crazy amount of these. I didn't get one because I didn't want to fly home with it because it's big. He has these subspecies box sets that come in like this wooden coffin.
Yeah,
people buying them like crazy.
Yeah. They look awesome.
Yeah, and I was like, damn, if I didn't have to fly with that, I would get one.
Oh, absolutely.
No,
but what I did
that'd be an awkward one to carry on to a plane. Yeah,
well, I would just tell people is like, that would my mind went someplace off color.
It's all good.
Anyway, what I did buy from them was I bought the Robot Jox Blue.
Okay.
Yeah, and I asked them if they had Crash and Burn, and they said we can send you a DVD of it, but it's going to be standard def. And I was like, well, I have the VHS, so I was like, I didn't go for it. I didn't go for the mail me a standard def DVD of Crash and Burn, but I did pick up the Blu-ray of Robot Wars, which I watched over the weekend to prepare for this podcast.
Beautiful. And I like to think that Charles Band has the longest line because he just talks to everyone for an hour.
Yeah.
He did talk to I did see him having a good time talking to people. And I would say the person with the next longest line at the show was Patty Mullen, the Frankenhooker.
Oh, good call.
Oh, that was cool. Yeah, I feel like it was a really bookended where John, you and I were at Forbidden Planet to get to meet Henenlotter, and a couple of 6 months before that, I met Patty Mullen at Mahoning. So I feel like I bookended my Frankenhooker.
Yes,
my year of Frankenhooker from 2023. But
so
yeah, Steve,
we should mention, just for people who may be tuning in for this episode and didn't listen to our previous Robot Jox episode, John Torrani is kind of we're going to go ahead and say the leading scholar, leading collector, leading expert on Stuart Gordon's Robot Jox, a movie we both liked immensely, still sits very high. I think it still sits in both of our top 10s. It's definitely in my top 10 of our rankings. A movie that we really had a lot of affection for, and I think it's a film that's definitely grown its kind of cult status over time.
Sure.
And today we're talking about two films that were at one point either directly or indirectly marketed as sequels to Robot Jox, in kind of a weird little bit of sort of a marketing chicanery that Charles Band usually likes to get up to. So let me give a little context. Today we're going to be talking about Crash and Burn first, because that movie's from 1990, and then Robot Wars came out in 1993. So we'll go chronologically with this. Let's start with Crash and Burn, which was released in September of 1990, directed by Charles Band, written by J.S. Cardone, and it stars Paul Gannis, Megan Ward, Jack McGee, Eva LaRue, Bill Moseley, and Ralph Waite. And yes, so in another bit of classically shameless Charles Band marketing, this film was heavily advertised for its connection to Robot Jox. In fact, in Europe, this movie is called Robot Jox 2: Crash and Burn. And it reused some of the sets, it reused some of the special effects here and there, and it even ripped marketing imagery from the poster. If you look at the poster, like the mech on there looks suspiciously similar to the one that's on the cover of Robot Jox. But that is really such a mislead for what this movie actually is. And it's really kind of hard to pin down what this movie actually is. But I would say if it's anything, it's a locked room murder mystery set in a world of giant robots that the giant robots don't really do much. Is that
for most of
accurate?
this movie? It's what we've now grown to refer to as a one set wonder.
Yes, very much so.
For a large portion of it.
They found an old abandoned oil refinery, and then they put people in there, and it's a very unusual movie, and not at all the film I was expecting. Definitely not the film that is advertised on that cover art. Like, it's one of those things where it's just accurate enough. You know, like, yes, a large robot that looks kind of like that does appear in this film. Yes, there's some kind of dusky hues, you know, to the sky when they go outside. And yes, these two actors, I believe, are the ones that appear in this film. But other than that, I think this is really a misleading tone for what this movie actually ended up being. I was very surprised by this one.
Yeah, I would like to have talked to Charles about this, because when I feel like adding the robot to it was almost kind of like an afterthought.
Yeah.
And I feel like the movie could work without the giant robot in it. And I feel like it wouldn't necessarily be bad. Because I like movies that involve the media, and I think this like apocalyptic TV station where the movie is set is not terrible. I enjoy it. I revisited this on the VHS in preparation for this podcast, and it's really not a bad little movie on its own. I would say, as far as like these little low budget things go, it's kind of cool. I would say it's probably more derivative of, say, like an Alien, and
The movie
There
that
are a
was coming to
lot
mind
of
for
things
me.
in this, lot of ingredients in this movie stew.
yes, that's a good way of describing it.
Weirdly,
Like a
the-
movie stew.
The movie that kept coming to mind for me, and I wish, like you said, I agree with the satirical element of like the post-apocalyptic TV station, and I wish they'd focused on that, because if they followed through on that and they capitalized on some of the weird early vibes in this movie, it could have been kind of a spiritual successor to A Boy and His Dog.
Yeah.
Is a movie that has kind of this cult following as this weird off-kilter, like post-apocalyptic pseudo comedy thing, you know? So that's kind of what I was getting a little bit off of it. And then it just sort of became a slasher a little bit after a while. And then, yeah, like you said, it also became an Aliens movie. And then they throw in a little bit of mech action at the very end of the movie, just so it feels like we got to the fireworks factory, you know? Like,
Well, before they do that, Steve, they throw in a little bit of The Thing, blood testing.
oh my God, that is
Yeah, that
straight
blood
from the
test.
Thing. Yeah.
I thought also, I don't know why I thought this, but I thought where you were going when you were going to say, like, this is kind of a stretch, but this is what I was getting shades of. I thought you were going to say UHF.
Yeah, I can see a little bit of UHF. Absolutely. Why not?
Can we talk about that blood test scene for a minute? Because something
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just my mindset at the time I was watching it or something. But is there a weird edit in there? Please, is Gresham Bird edited by Ted Nicolau? I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
One, yeah.
So, Ted, forgive me, and I'll ask you this when I see you in Dallas.
Mm.
What I feel like there's a strange edit in there where they show everyone else's blood, but they don't show Bill Moseley's. But they make a point to say that it's red and it looks normal.
I caught that. I think
Why didn't they just show it if it's like red and looks normal?
Right.
I'm wondering if
and
that was
then-
an insert or something. Yeah.
But they like showed everybody else's.
Yeah.
So that's why it's strange. Like, I felt like by not showing it, I don't know why not show it.
Well, they kind of they're showing their hand, at least to who one of the symptoids is.
Yeah. And I mean,
but they
I
say
think
it's normal. So at that point, if you're the viewer, you're like, well, it's not Mosley.
it's normal. I mean, if anybody
His ADR in later.
Yeah, if anyone conveys instant trustability on screen, a guy who will never possibly be a villain in any way, shape, or form, does not have a weird energy at all, you definitely think of Bill Moseley. He's the Mr. Rogers of this movie. He's definitely that kind of stunt casting. I will say, I think Moseley is fucking great in this movie. He is so committed. Like, when everyone else seems to be a little sleepwalking, he is just absolutely going for it and having so much fun.
Well, he turns it on when he has to. In the beginning, he's looking and sounding his most like a Will Forte character. Yeah. And then as it goes on, he gets big when he needs to get big. And I really like how he approaches the role after that. Because he's supposed to be unassuming, and even though the movie obviously sets up a lot of ways where you can telegraph that he's going to end up being the synthoid or the killer, or one of them anyway, when the reveal does happen, I just love the switch that's flipped and how big he starts to go in that performance, because he goes from being unassuming to all of a sudden he's vamping and it's fun, and I like the level of commitment. Like when he's attacking Winston Wicket, he's making one-liners, he's yelling in his face, he's saying, "Oh, it looks like it's too late for a doctor. Looks like we're gonna have to amputate," and rips his arm off, and it's super fun. Like it's a fun performance, because I feel like I do see how some of these other people, I wouldn't really say Ralph Waite, who's playing Lathan Hooks in this movie. He is definitely, especially early on in this movie, channeling the late Peter Finch.
Sure.
In certain parts, but I think like Paul Gannis and Megan Ward and Eva LaRue, and they can be a little flat, I think, at some different points in this movie. I mean, Jack McGee is playing Winston Pickett. He's playing a part. Like, he is making
I love Jack McGee.
Acting choices.
Yeah.
But I think this is kind of the perfect cast for a small movie like this, because these are all people who you recognize in a lot of ways of, oh, that guy did one episode of this. This guy did one episode of this. They really ran the gamut with television shows of the era that they were in. I mean, Ralph Waite obviously was on the Waltons. I think he was the patriarch of the Waltons. And Megan Ward we've become really familiar with, because this is now the fourth Full Moon movie starring Megan Ward we've covered on the show.
This is her very first film. It's her very first Full Moon movie, and it's also the last one of her run that we're going to talk about. But yeah, she was in Crash and Burn, Transfers 2 and 3, and Arcade, just kind of all back to back. And then she had a nice little run in the early 90s. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, Joe's Apartment and PCU. I mean, she was a bankable kind of female counterpart to some smarmy male leads.
Oh, is she like the protester in PCU?
I think so.
I believe so. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. Okay. But I feel like we're getting to know you, Megan. So if you're listening out there, puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. Let us know if you'd like to come on the show. We'd be more than happy to have you.
I also want to ask how comfortable she felt about how many creepy characters are being with her in this movie. Her character is written as 16. And I feel like a lot of the male characters in this are a little leery towards her, including our hero, which didn't make me feel great. She was like 22 at the time of the shooting of this movie, but still not great.
One quick thing about the casting that I want to bring up that I just find to be an odd coincidence is that you have both Paul Gannis and Jack McGee in this movie, who would later reunite in the Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas.
Oh, God.
The fact that both of those guys ended up in that movie as uncredited, like, patrons in like a restaurant or something in a background scene, I just think it's one of the oddest coincidences. Like, I can only imagine like those two guys running into each other on set and being like, "Holy shit, did we make a movie 10 years ago together?" Yeah, it's a fun one. I saw that when I was scrolling through the IMDb, and I was looking at someone's filmography, and I went, wait a second. I just saw that Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas. Wait, I must have looked at this already. And then I went back, and sure enough, they were both in the movie. But this is a really interesting one. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's get to the giant mechs faster than this movie does, because man, they really pad that out. It is just this long wait for the movie to kind of pay off on this very early kind of Chekhovian shot of a rusting out mech out in the desert, and it takes more than an hour for us to pay this off. And then when they do finally awaken this robot, his one purpose is to move a girder. Did I miss anything? That's kind of that's kind of all he does.
That's all he does.
Yeah.
And they got David Allen to puppeteer that. David Allen came back to do that, which is kind of, I mean, this is, I don't know if this is like while he's in the middle of doing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or what. I don't know. I don't know where this like falls in the David Allen timeline, but somehow, like according to the Video Zone anyway, it's David Allen.
Yeah.
Now, while we're talking about this, the robot, I have a theory, and I don't know. I think the arms and legs are reused in Robot Wars.
I would not doubt that
with
at
a different
all.
torso. That's what I've been watching it. I believe it's the same arms and legs, the same lower half, and then they have a different torso for Crash and Burn that's in Robot Wars.
John,
Now,
are you insinuating that Full Moon would reuse props and cut corners in any way? Because I don't know if we can stand for that kind of blaspheming on this show.
well, I don't think it was necessarily. I think it was probably like a David Allen thing where they were trying to get David Allen to come back and do this, and he's like, "Well, this is just what I'm going to do," because I'm in the middle of doing something else. Me speculating. I don't know for certain. I would have to ask. Now, what I could do is I could ask my friend Carl, who owns the robot from Crash and Burn.
Oh my God. Okay.
So I will see if he can answer this for me, and then we could like follow up or something. Carl also owns one of the Scorpion bots. What I could tell from the Video Zone of Robot Wars is that there are two different scales. There's like a large scale and there's like a smaller scale. There's like a large scale for puppeteering and there's a smaller scale for stop motion. That's how it appears to me, which is similar like what they did on Robot Jox. It's like a similar idea where there's like where the robots are in two different scales. That's what I deduced from the Video Zones, because they don't really explain it fully.
No.
So
but they use a lot of like forced perspective techniques and things like that with like scale models, and there's a lot of. I mean, I don't know. Would you guys be cool to transition to Robot Wars? Because I feel like I have more to say about Robot Wars in this context. Was there anything about Crash and Burn we wanted to mention?
I mean, I mean, we covered the performances, which I think are really good. I think Megan. I like it. I think Jack McGee's good in the movie. I like it. When swells up and Bill Moseley rips it off, and that whole thing. I thought that was cool. We
get a couple of good kill sequences towards the end. Here's
the thing that I think we need to remember when it comes to Crash and Burn.
Oh yeah,
it came out. I think technically before Robot Jox, and it was intended to capitalize on the popularity of Robot Jox. That is only applicable if you're renting it, because if you are just going through cable and you happen to find it on cable, okay. Just remember, first time I saw Robot Jox was on cable. First time I saw Robot Wars was on cable. I don't know if Crash and Burn was ever on cable. I cannot speak to that. But I would just say, if you were unaware of the video box and you just rented a Full Moon movie called Crash and Burn, okay, you wouldn't know that it had anything to do with the robot. If you just watched it. So that's what So I would say for you to say like it takes an hour to get to the robot. Yeah. If you didn't see the video, if you didn't see the box, you wouldn't even know there was a robot in it at all.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, this is a case of the marketing kind of setting an expectation that is maybe not what the film was intended. But you're absolutely right that this was released as kind of a competitor slash mockumentary mockbuster version of Robot Jox, which was one of the movies that was kind of taken away from Charles Band when Empire shut down. They delayed the release for several years, and I think maybe he's being a little cheeky about that. Maybe he's a little hurt that this movie got taken away from him, and so he kind of wants to take a little bite of that market.
Robot Jox got missing in action. That's what happened.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because you can read that two ways. I mean, it could be like the Missing in Action and the Missing in Action 2, which were shot in reverse order. Basically, the second one was shot first and was supposed to be the first movie, but then James Cameron's script for Rambo: First Blood Part 2 had leaked, so people were like, "Oh, wait, let's make this movie first." It's like, well, we already made Missing in Action. Well, we're going to make another Missing in Action movie, and we're going to rush that one to beat Rambo: First Blood into the movie theater. And then that came out before First Blood, and I think they even got the sequel of Missing in Action, which was shot first, out in theaters before Rambo: First Blood Part 2 came out. I always think about that when I think about how this was kind of maneuvered the same way. We didn't talk a whole lot about like the corporation aspect of it, which I think is neat. Like,
definitely,
I like the little touches to where like Winston Wicket has his show, and the only reason that he has a show is because his uncle is a shareholder in the corporation, and all the other TV shows are turned off. And then they have like the virtual schoolroom, which I appreciated when we first meet Eva LaRue's character, and they're basically like, oh, it's like, who invented uranium? Omnicore, partial credit.
Yeah, very much.
It's pretty great, that aspect of it. So there are little touches that I enjoyed in it, and again, you're right though, Steve. Like tonally, it's weird because it starts almost like a Mad Max type movie.
Yeah.
It's almost like you get the sense you're gonna follow the character of Tyson. As he kind of goes through the barren wasteland, but he doesn't. Like he stops to pick up the what's he picking up? The coolant? No,
Freon. Yeah, the Freon.
Yeah. He's picking up the Freon, and then it's like, well, there's a mech storm coming in, or something, and so they're like, you can stay here, hunker down here if you want to, and then it turns into like a location.
Isn't it like a sunstorm or something where it's going to be like too hot to travel or something?
There's a word. Like there's a word for it that they threw around a bunch of times, and now I'm blanking on it because we were saying mech to talk about the robots, and it's something like that. So anybody who's listening to this, feel free to comment on our posts about this episode and tell us, if we don't correct ourselves before the end, what the storm is called, because they do reference the storm. I'm a big fan of the last scene of this movie, which is where Megan Ward, she's at a gas station and a Mexican guy tells her that a storm's coming, and then she says, "I know," and she drives away towards a map painting.
It was good. It was really good.
It's a really great scene.
Original shot, which I really liked. Yeah.
I do think that you can view this movie as a bit of a letdown. It's interesting if you. It's mentioned, and it came from the video aisle, that this was being shot with primarily the same crew as Meridian at the same time as Meridian. And I do think that there is a little bit, because Charles Band was directing both of those. And I think there is sort of a feeling with this one that it is a bit of an afterthought. Like, say what you will about the content of the story of Meridian and the questionable and problematic elements of that. That movie, every cent of it, I feel like shows up on screen.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was sort of the prestige movie they were working on at the time. And this one was kind of a quick cash grab, like, let's churn something out quick that we can tie into Robot Jox and get it out there fast. And I think you feel that a little bit with it. I mean, like most of these movies, it's 83 minutes. I got through it pretty easily, and I may pop it back on at some point again to watch the scenes with Winston Wicket and the scenes with Bill Moseley in them. I really enjoyed the scene. I thought it was pretty funny, the scene in the shower, because I didn't really pick up on what it was that made her realize that he was a synthoid, because there's definitely, he tells her to close her eyes. He has his hands over her eyes, and then he's telling her, she's saying, "Oh, your hands aren't as big as Winston's hands, so you're not." But she definitely turns around and appears to have her eyes open.
I do know what this is. Yeah,
Okay,
I do know
thank you,
this.
Steve,
He has like some battle damage on his face.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some like scars, and you could see a little bit of the metal under his face. That's why he was covering her eyes the whole time.
Yeah.
And then when she finally saw it,
Okay, so I feel like the
They kept-
staging of that shot
Yeah.
could have been set up differently so that we could have gotten a look at like the correct side of his face and a reaction shot. Maybe I was a little surprised.
It was a
watching
weird framing. Yeah, we are seeing the other side of his face, and I don't know if they just didn't have the makeup effects and they were just hoping that would carry over from the previous scene. But yeah, he had some like little battle damage, some like T2 style battle damage on his face.
yeah, and then he electrocutes her, which is obviously what you do there. But yeah, I mean, those were just some aspects of Crash and Burn. It's a weird little movie. It's
a weird one. It's a weird one.
It's not really what you expect when you say it in the same breath as Robot Jox or as we were doing for this episode, Robot Wars.
Robot Wars was also similarly marketed on the strength of Robot Jox. It's actually two of the words on the VHS cover and on the poster of this is like, first there was Robot Jox. All right. So to me, that pretty heavily implies a direct thematic connection or like a story connection. You know, this seems like it's planting its flag and saying, yes, we are a sequel. And it's still really not, but this is closer. This is definitely more of what you would expect from a movie that's advertised like this. A couple of details about this.
Steve.
Robot Wars was released April 28th, 1993. It's directed by Albert Band. It's written by Jackson Barr and Charles Band, and it stars John Michael Paul, Barbara Crampton, James Staley, Danny Kamakoma, Yuji Okamoto, and Lisa Rinna. So again, drawing connections that weren't really there, like we said, and this one even shares a cast member with Robot Jox. Danny Kamakona plays the evil general in this one. He was in Robot Jox as well, playing a very different character. So like they're even recycling a little bit from that level. They also have Dave Allen doing the animation on this. So like the robots look and move and have a very similar design to Robot Jox. This really is just kind of Kirkland brand version of Robot Jox. It's like it's everything but the label at this point because they just can't make it. But it's using a lot of the same assets. Some casting notices here that I want to shout out. First of all is Don Michael Paul, who was a B-movie actor for a lot of the 80s. And now I didn't realize he has become a really prolific director of direct-to-video sequels to movies you didn't know had sequels. So I'm talking Sniper, Kindergarten Cop, The Scorpion King, Jarhead, and 3 of the Tremors films. I think he directed the 3 most recent Tremors films. So, he's still working quite a bit.
He also wrote a movie that I'm sure you saw on cable in the early 90s if you had a pair of eyeballs in your head, which was Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
He wrote that movie?
Mickey Rourke and Don Johnson. And that's one that I remember. It was either, if I turned on HBO in 1992, there was a 50% chance it was Don't Tell Her It's Me with Steve Guttenberg. It was Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. I must have seen that movie probably 10 times, never choosing to put it on per se, but settling for the fact that it was on. But
I don't know if I've ever, that's one of those movies that I know I've seen all of it, but I don't think I've ever seen it all in order, like in a chronological order. I've seen like the last 10 minutes here, then I've seen the middle 10 minutes before I decide to see,
of course.
On, so I can probably patchwork that movie together in my head. It probably still wouldn't be very good if I had to guess, but
so
it was.
I think it's worth pointing out that right now John has the video box of Robot Wars propped up in front of him by his microphone, and so we said this on mic for the first episode, John, that you were on, but when the early stages of the show, when I was telling people about the concept, multiple people said to me, well, when you get to Robot Jox, you have to talk to John Torrani.
Yeah.
And that was proven to be correct. I think we would have been doing the movie and the show a disservice had we talked to anybody else. I'm curious because this one, as Steve mentioned, I think is a little closer in spirit in a lot of ways to Robot Jox than Crash and Burn is. So we know that like you have found so much to love in Robot Jox and so much to to want to accumulate these props and this artwork and all this stuff. Does your adoration for it flow into Robot Wars the same way?
Truth be told, not really. I wish it was a better film. I'm not trying to take anything away from Albert Band or David Allen or obviously my friend Barbara Crampton or anybody who was involved in it. I love Yuji Okamoto. Like obviously from not just from Karate Kid, but also from Better Off Dead. I think he's great, and I often feel bad for him that it gets relegated to doing an accent that he does not actually have.
Right.
But I think he's really good. I enjoy him on the Cobra Kai series. I'm really glad they brought him back for that series. I love that series.
Oh, I didn't realize they brought him back. That's cool.
Oh, he's in like 3 seasons of it.
Oh, okay. See, I'm way behind on that one.
Oh yeah. He's like way back. He's in it a lot.
Okay.
That's good to know. I only saw the very beginning of that series. I think I only saw like maybe the first half of the first season. I got to actually jump back in because I did enjoy what I saw.
I saw like the first 2 seasons. I think I liked those, but yeah, I haven't checked back in a while.
Okay, well, check back in. It's kind of my favorite show.
Oh, cool.
But anyway, getting back to Robot Wars. I came across it on cable one morning. It was one of those, like, I woke up early. Like I told the story of me waking up early and watching movies on cable because my parents always had the best cable package they could get. So this was one of the one of those movies, and I can't I didn't see it from the beginning. I think the part of it that I remember was when the Scorpion bot is transporting people to the southwestern town that's left to look like a southwestern town from the 90s or something.
Yeah.
And they walk past the movie theater that has Puppet Master 54 on the marquee, like, like them doing a little nod to themselves.
If this movie is 2041, that's not an unrealistic number for them to hit. They've got a little time. We're at what, like 15, 18?
Unfortunately, we didn't get to Jaws 19 by 2015, which we were promised.
Really, really personal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, it's okay. But yeah, I can't remember if I saw this or Robot Jox first. I genuinely can't remember.
Interesting. I mean, they share so much DNA that like they could be seen kind of like as an extension, or like you could make it. If you were to tell me that this movie was made up of like cut footage from Robot Jox, like they just kind of spliced together a new movie out of some subplots that they cut, I would believe that. I feel like it's similar enough. Albert Band is obviously not kind of on the same level directorially as Stuart Gordon is, just in terms of the pacing and the timing and things like that. But I think there is a spirit.
I think it also plays into is like the time he was at in his life. He was. I don't want to say he was pretty old, but I think he was probably towards the end of his career.
He'd been at it in the 50s at this point. So he was getting up there, and he'd always been a guy who could turn around a movie quickly and kind of squeeze the most out of the budget. And I think that's kind of the coolest thing that Robot Wars does, is that you do forget that this movie is substantially cheaper than Robot Jox. Like I don't forget
that. Not trying to be a dick, but I feel like the look of it, the world building, the costumes, everything. I see a lot of the rough edges there. It could just be because I've seen Robot Jox so many times. That stuff is really glaring to me.
There's more like Robot Jox feels like it takes place kind of in a futuristic landscape, whereas this feels like it's in an empty hometown or something. Like it feels small town suburban. Like most of the environments don't really have any battle damage on it. But when you actually do break out the robots, and the robots take up significantly less screen time in this than they do in Robot Jox, but it is significantly more screen time than in Crash and Burn. So you're going to be getting that. And when they break those out, they look fantastic. Like the Scorpion robot in particular, I think, moves so fluidly, and I think it just looks really cool. It's just an amazing design. And I think the special effects here actually look pretty fantastic, even if you can see kind of...
Milo Needles is the art director of this movie and Robot Jox, and I think you can see a similarity between the two of them. Like I think this is, like you said, you can see the difference kind of in budget, but I think there was an attempt to make it look the same. And then when the robots are out there, it does look good. And I want to echo something we were saying before. Like John, you were saying you weren't sure if you saw this or Robot Jox first. I'm not sure either. I think I saw. So this is a movie I had seen before, and I'm actually going to say that when I watched Robot Jox for the episode, I feel like it was, whether I had seen it or not, I felt like I was watching it a first time. This was the movie that I saw thinking it was Robot Jox.
Oh, that's funny.
I saw this movie probably 20 years ago, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
And so when Robot Jox,
you fell for the Mockbuster ruse.
When I would hear people refer to Robot Jox, and this is sort of a memory that came back to me after having talked it out a little bit in the episode, because I realized, I think what happened was I saw this movie. I somewhere subsequently heard people reference Robot Jox, maybe in conversations about Stuart Gordon. And then I realized, Robot Jox. I thought that movie was called Robot Wars. Maybe this is a chopping mall Killbot situation where maybe I saw it under, maybe its title was changed for VHS. I didn't really know the scope of, the difference between Empire and Full Moon or anything like that at the time. I just thought, maybe this is the movie I saw under a different title. Maybe people thought Robot Jox wouldn't push VHS tapes, so they changed the title to Robot Wars. I really didn't have a frame of reference. And this was the movie I thought, because I also remember thinking when people would talk about Robot Jox, I would bring it up talking about Stuart Gordon and Barbara Crampton.
Yeah.
And Barbara Crampton, and she's in Robot Jox too, was just a thought that I had. Because I thought these were the same movies. And then,
they're easy to conflate. Yeah, this is what I was worried was going to happen with talking about these two movies, and that didn't end up being a problem. But, this is, like we said, it's a substantially more fun movie than Crash and Burn. At least I think it's sprightlier, it moves a little bit, but it is similarly very talky. I think both of these are movies that are much heavier on exposition than you might expect for movies that have pretty thin plots. Like these worlds, the world in this one in particular doesn't feel super developed or super lived in. Like it feels like this post-apocalypse has been mildly inconvenient, but it doesn't feel as dire as it does, and like with people starving and everybody
I would say it's not even apocalyptic. I would say there's some sort of conflict going on between two factions, but everything else seems hunky-dory because the people are going, they're like tourists are riding around in a giant scorpion. So it's not like, I guess it feels slightly dystopian, but not really.
And they don't really fully commit to it, because the event that they speak about is the Great Toxic Gas Scare of 1993. Yes. Now, they don't say the Great Toxic Gas Attack or disaster or catastrophe. There was a scare. Yeah. That's not anything to be really worried. It looks like they changed their entire society around the possibility of a toxic gas, if that's what I'm to understand. But maybe that's just a phrasing error. But but it does feel a little non-committal in that sense. It's like we're not really going to go full post-apocalypse because we can't really afford it.
And that is why I prefer Crash and Burn to Robot Wars. Is because
it's interesting. Yeah.
I prefer the world building in Crash and Burn. It reminds me of this other movie called Neon City.
Okay.
Little known scene movie starring Ted Gagan's friend. It's directed by Ted Gagan's friend Monty Markham.
Oh, okay.
Directed it.
All right. Yeah,
And it stars Ironside and Vanity.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
That's
pretty
great.
cool. It's very similar. They do the thing in it. It's like 91, and they do the same thing that they do in Crash and Burn, where it's like, we can't go outside. There's like the heat storm will like melt us because there's no ozone layer, and the sun is too bright, and we'll be damaged by the sun. So that's kind of why I prefer Crash and Burn, just as a movie.
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy the the robot action in Robot Wars more.
And that there is some, as opposed to just kind of moving things from place to place. Yeah.
No, I kind of am inclined to agree. I think there was some cool ideas in Crash and Burn that aren't really fleshed out. Because I found the opening of the movie really interesting. I thought when Tyson was getting to this gas station, and then you got the guy who's selling him the Freon, who is, I can't think of this man as anything other than like the gangster from Adventures in Babysitting who owns the auto body shop.
Sure.
Like that's that's who that guy is. Them talking about like, because it wasn't just a post-apocalyptic. There was all this political stuff going on too. It was like the factions of like this Liberty Party who are trying to revolt against Omnicorps, and it was like or whatever they were called, and it was like that stuff was pretty interesting to me. I'm going to kind of echo what you were saying before, where like maybe do this one without the robots.
Yeah.
And spend some more time, because you know what this reminded me of? This movie reminded me a lot also of like Creepazoids.
Oh yeah.
In that it was a bunch of people kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Creepazoids obviously directed by David Dakota, Crash and Burn produced by David Dakota, Robot Wars also produced by David Dakota, but with an Ellen Cabot. We got an Ellen Cabot as producer, unless he stole an actual person's name to use as his pseudonym when he's directing.
He said that Ellen Cabot is a real person, but it's a
okay. I was wondering
from high school that before he came out, who was mean to him. So like whenever he needs to distance himself, he takes on her persona.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. Like, I mean, Test Tube Teens from the year 2000. Like, okay, I can understand. Like, you're doing this first. You're shooting this Torchlight movie. You don't know how this is going to go. You don't know if you want your name associated to this or anything like that. Then you direct it under, an Ellen Cabot or an Alan Smithy, if you will, if you're David Dakota. But it's like, for Robot Wars, it's really interesting because I feel like you have Barbara Crampton, like you've got your lead who is good at playing just a punchable asshole.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. And so like that aspect of it is fun. Like there's some cast in there now where that, we didn't really have that as much in Crash and Burn in terms of noticeable people. But the fact that he wouldn't want his name on Robot Wars is really interesting. An interesting choice for Dave Dakota at that time.
That's why when we need to get Dave Dakota, not just for like talk about one movie. I would like to talk to him about a breadth of things so we could find things out. Like that's why I would like it if Ted Nicolau could come back on and we just do a rapid fire post production. I want to ask him about his post production work, not just his directing work.
Yeah, Ted, we already interviewed you about all these movies you directed, but now we want to interview again only about movies you edited. So think about that.
Yes. I'm gonna present it to him when I see him in Dallas.
Dang,
I love it. I mean, Ted is always welcome. He was amazing. He was so generous with his time, and he was really great. But no, you're totally right, John. Like one of the people, like, there's been names coming up in conversations, like, as the show has started to grow and as I've made connections with more people, it turns out, like, this might not be that surprising, but the world of Full Moon is a small one, and people know each other. And so people have said to me, oh, well, you need to get Bill Butler. You need to get Dave Dakota. And we had Dave Parker on recently. I know you hooked us up with Dave Parker for Dead Meet the Living, which was a few weeks ago.
Guy.
That's great.
Yeah, and that was amazing. And I think, like, you start a show like this, and I think you start small in the sense of, like, here's our mission statement. We're going to watch these movies. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about what we think works, what we think doesn't work, but we think they're all worthy of exploration in some way. And then it was like, all right, well, let's bring some other people on, and let's see if we can collaborate with people who we enjoy listening to or people whose opinions we trust. And it kind of just organically grew to where now we have a lot of connections to people involved. And so now that we're kind of like jumping head first into the deep end of the company, it's like, okay, well, we don't have to speculate now, because now we're wondering, like, how these things are made. Okay, well, let's just bring on, somebody who worked FX for Full Moon for 20 years, and then they're going to have all these behind the scenes movies, and they're going to hook us up with somebody else. And so that's been such a fun aspect of it. It started off where they were almost these mythical people, where it's like we're saying their names, and by the third or fourth episode, you start to notice that it's the same people working within the company a lot. Like Charlie Band has a stable of people he loves bringing around. Yeah. But now, like, some of those people are people that we've collaborated with now and spoken to and gotten, firsthand accounts on things from, which was not something I could speak only for myself, but didn't really expect that to be an aspect of the show, at least so early on. So I keep thinking that way. Every time I watch a movie now, I look at all the credits and I think, who's available, who's still around, who's still working. Let me check this person's IMDb. And then, that's been great. And I would, we did said some unkind things to some Dave Dakota stuff. So Dave, I apologize in advance, but we'd still love to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any Full Moon people who happen to be listening, reach out. We're always happy to have you on and talk about it. Do we have any final thoughts on Robot Wars?
Well, I would just say, I don't know why, but someone made the conscious decision, let's get Danny Kamakona and Yuji Okamoto, because they're also in Karate Kid 2 together. Like, someone made that call. Like, as a, like I said, I've kind of like tipped my hand as being a Karate Kid super fan. Oh yeah, they're both in Karate Kid Part 2 together. They're like the villains. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what I need to know. I don't know what it is. Charles Band needs someone. We need to find out. This is something I was going to ask Barbara. Like, whose call was that? Why did they? I mean, because it's not like it's marketed like starring the guys from Karate Kid Part 2. It just so happens, but obviously a conscious decision was made.
Yeah, no, it was just like the casting call for Viva Rock Vegas. I mean,
yeah. Well, it may even be more just that there were limited casting options for Asian American actors at this time too, so like maybe not, if you do some genre stuff or like play a villain role, then maybe you get typecast in more villainy kind of stuff, or more supporting parts like that. So it's cool that they kind of made that transition. Like I don't even know that it's like a conscious thought, to bring those two guys together.
I feel like it has to be.
Cool. Yeah.
I refuse to believe anything else. I need to find out the story behind it, because even Yuji Okamoto in the video zone says, "Oh, it's like a family reunion." So there's something I need to know. It could have just been, we had Danny and Robot Jox, and then we're gonna get Danny for Robot Wars, just so we could say that we had someone in both, and then Danny was like, who you should cast as my nephew or whatever.
That'd be cool if he did. I mean,
I would like to know. I need to know. So this was
Danny Kamakoma's final performance. Unfortunately, he died a few years after this. But I always like him when he pops up. Like he's a great, like, solid character actor, and he's good in both of these movies.
One thing I do want to point out, Steve, though, we didn't talk about, because we talked a little bit about the cast in this movie, but we didn't really talk about, like, Jay Downing or Don Michael Paul so much, or James Staley, who plays the character Stumpy in this movie, obviously talked about Barbara Crampton. But, you know, when we did our episode on Cellar Dweller, we talked about Brian Robbins. We talked about how he went on to become probably the single most successful alumni of any of these Full Moon movies in terms of being the, you know, head of Paramount.
I'm glad you brought this up because
But we might now be dipping into the single most popular person in the cultural zeitgeist to grace one of these movies to this point, which is, of course, Lisa Rinna, who was in fact a real housewife.
Yeah, this is Harry Hamlin. I knew her from Entertainment Tonight, like back in the early 90s. She was a correspondent on that. I was thinking that same exact thing. I'm like, oh yeah, she's kind of quietly one of the more successful Full Moon alums to a degree, because she's still around, like she's still doing her thing, you know, and she's kind of dipped her toe in a little bit of everything. She's been on Broadway, she's got like her own businesses, you know, she's got like an acting career and a hosting career, like she's done a little bit of everything. And of course she is a real housewife, which means this movie shares that same distinction as Halloween, of being two classic genre pictures that have a cast member from Real Housewives in there. So there you go. Shout out to my friend Ashley, who's had to explain who many of the housewives were.
She had to explain who Kyle Richards was to you.
She was the one I knew. Kyle Richards was the one I knew. I knew Lisa Rinna. I didn't know Lisa Rinna was a Real Housewife until I was researching this episode. But yeah, I guess that's what most people know her from.
Well, I would say she's not totally unattainable, because in the Video Zone, Barbara says that she's friends with Lisa from soaps. So I don't know. I'd never say never.
I love that aspect of that, because it's such a quaint beginning where Barbara Crampton is introducing her as like, this is my friend Lisa. It's so nice to get to work with your friends. And Lisa auditioned for a Full Moon movie previous to this one, and I suggested her for this movie or something along those lines. And it was just like, and that now is the person who is married to Harry Hamlin for the last like 27 years, a Real Housewife, Entertainment Tonight host with like 4 million Instagram followers.
Yeah,
like she's doing just fine.
Well, and, you know they're keeping that going, because you guys are you guys familiar with Vanderpump Rules?
In name only.
No, I know.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. So
is that what the guy shouts before he goes off the cliff in Billy Madison?
I have no idea. I'm not.
I got you,
guy.
Steve.
But my background is in unscripted television.
Okay.
And what I can tell you is, in one of the like recent, like, no, I don't want to say recent, one of the later Puppet Master sequels, like from the 2010s. They cast a guy named Tom Sandoval.
Okay.
He is the man version of Lisa Rinna, where he's on a reality show. It's like one of the hottest shows on TV. Like, he's got like a ton of followers on Instagram. He is huge. He is like a juggernaut for Bravo. He's probably getting, I think he's had his own spinoff, because he had this like crazy affair. And his name is Tom Sandoval, and they were calling it like Scandoval. It was a whole.
that fell right in there. Elapsed.
I've heard that term before.
You probably heard the term Scandoval. Yeah. And this guy is like and I like him. He's in his early 40s. He owns a bar in L.A. With his other friend that's also named Tom. The bar is called Tom Tom. This is the whole thing. To me, he's the biggest person you could get right now for this podcast. If there was like a wish list that I could have for you guys, if you could pluck anyone out of the universe and make them do this podcast, you would need to get Tom Sandoval, because you would instantly get like 1 million listeners to this podcast.
Hey, I'd be down. I'd be down.
That guy, look up his Puppet Master, and I would say that is like the white whale of this podcast, because having that guy
putting it in the docket. Puppet Master, Axis of Evil. Axis of Evil. We're making a note next to that episode.
Okay. That'd be cool.
Yeah, he was trying to be an actor. Yeah, he tried to be an actor for a minute, and he had this he had this like girlfriend named Kristen, who I am low key in love with, who has since left the show, but like might be coming back on the show. Anyway, this is like the way I found out about Vanderpump was it's very similar to a show that I was the supervisor for. So I had this mandate: if you could ever hire anybody from Vanderpump Rules, hire them, because their show is like a similar style to our show. So that's how I first found out about it. And then, you know, my girlfriend's really into it. My girlfriend's sister's like really into it. So I started watching it and I was like, wait a second, that guy's in Puppet Master, Axis of Evil. You know,
so not a connection I expected to make.
Not a connection
at all.
And also, Reggie Bannister's in an episode of Vanderpump Rules.
Really?
It's crazier and crazier and crazier.
Is he playing the guitar?
It is a music connection, yeah. Like someone like in the cast has a band, and Reggie like introduces their band. It's so weird. It's so bizarre. Like that really Reggie bizarre. Bannister's in an episode of Vanderpump Rules.
I have to say, this has run the gamut. I think of all the episodes that we've recorded, we've gone from a post-apocalyptic crash and burn to the kind of light, bright, silly robot wars to reality television. I love it. We have covered so much in this episode, and so we're just casting a really wide net. It really is. That's
the magic of full moon.
There it is, right there. Well, John, it's been so great to have you back. We really appreciate you bringing your expertise with these movies to bear for us once again. Is there anything that you're working on you'd like to let people know about? Anything you can point them towards?
Yes, I have 3 big Blu-ray projects coming out, and I don't know if I'm allowed to mention any of them.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. Well, we can just say you've got some mysterious projects.
Yeah. One, I would say, is a 50th anniversary, so you can figure out what's movies turning 50. Another is I was shooting something in Pittsburgh 4, so you could extrapolate what that could be. And the other I'm working on with Heather Buckley, and we're determined to turn this DVD extra into a feature-length film that will play festivals. So Amazing. We're working very hard. We're working, I'm trying to think if there's any at all connection to Full Moon with that movie, and there's not. But
damn.
I will come back on this podcast with Tom Sandoval to discuss Axis of Evil, and by that point I should be able to tell you about all 3 of those Blu-rays that are coming out.
And I'm just smiling and nodding because I know what all 3 of them are, and they're big ones, and I'm excited for.
I guess I did.
Yeah, you told me, so I know.
Okay, you have to text me off mic. I'm curious because it's gonna be. I'm making some lists in my head. I'm like, no, it's probably not Godfather 2, but you never know.
No, you're gonna like them. That's all I'm gonna say. And if you like what we do, jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave us a nice 5-star rating and maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find the show on Instagram at puppetmasters_castlefreaks. You can follow me at _Giallo_Jerry or Steve at Minotaur Matador. You can also find the show on X, on Threads, on Blue Sky, on YouTube, all of the major social media platforms. So just subscribe and give us a follow and see what we have going on. This is not the only show that Steve's got going on, though. So, Steve, you got something else to plug for our listeners?
I sure do. I've also got a podcast called Cinema Arcade. That's where we are watching a movie and playing the video game based on that movie to see how they contrast, compare, compliment, or insult one another. I believe when we're listening to this episode, we're actually ahead of Cinema Arcade at this point, even though I started Cinema Arcade before this. We've been very diligent in our early recordings, so I'm not sure exactly where we are with that. I think we've got the episode coming out on the Da Vinci Code and Constantine, kind of around those eras. So we're firmly in the 2005, and that's definitely one of the pinnacles of movies where I say we're covering that and people go, there's a game of that? That's one of the immediate reactions I get. So I'm excited to see what the hell that game actually is. But yeah, Cinema Arcade, you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Same as us, and you should check us out next week because we've got a fun one coming up. I'm excited to check this one out. It's from 1988, so back in the Empire days. It's a movie called Prison. And this movie is a little hard to find, and it's a little hard to Google, too. I tried Prison, then I tried Prison Movie, and then I had to finally say Prison Movie Rennie Harlin, because this is the American film debut of Rennie Harlin, and also, I believe, the first leading man performance ever from Viggo Mortensen. So lots of fun stuff to talk about with this one. I'm excited to get into it. I believe you can find the movie on YouTube in full.
You can find the movie on YouTube if you want to watch along or watch in preparation for the show. I'm super excited because, as luck would have it, of all the odd coincidences in the world, that movie is actually playing this week at Nighthawk Cinema. So I am going to watch the movie in the theater, and then I believe 2 days later we're recording that episode. And the timing of that is just really odd and fortuitous and serendipitous and amazing. And so I'm super excited. I wonder if it's going to be a big discrepancy between how we feel about the movie. I'm going to come in, super jazzed, and Steve's going to be like, "This is very middle of the road." But we'll see how it goes. But definitely,
we'll see. I'm primed up to like it. I love prison movies. I love Rennie Harlin, so I'm primed up to like it. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Was that one? Did it have a DVD release? I feel like it did.
It did, but it's out of print at this point. I think it's pretty valuable.
Was Shout Factory, maybe?
Yeah, it's Shout Factory. I remember.
Yeah,
I think it's an out of print Shout Factory, kind of like Ghost Town, which we did not too long ago. It was the same thing. Well, anyway, listeners, we will see you next week for Prison, one that we are both very excited about, and we hope you're excited too, and we will see you next time.